Today we're going to be talking about the difference between Mrs. and ma'am. Those are two ways, two words that you can use to address a woman. Ma'am, well, I haven't heard of people saying ma'am, addressing someone's a woman, ma'am, and then they, after that, call their name, at least on movies. So I haven't heard a native speaker say, "Good morning, Ma'am Astri. How can I help you today?" I haven't heard of that thing. Yeah, I've heard of this thing between Indonesian. It's kind of common for them to address someone by saying Ma'am Astri, Ma'am Cynthia, Ma'am whatever. But at least in movies, yeah, it's common for them to say, "Ma'am, how can I help you?" Or, "Ma'am, are you lost or something? Can I help you?" "Good morning, ma'am. Can I help you today?" Those are common. Now let's talk about Mrs. M or S. Yes, you address someone who is married or you think is married, Mrs. M or S. And then you add her last name after it. For example, Mrs. White, Mrs. Green, Mrs. Brown, and so on. "Good morning, Mrs. Green. How can I help you today?" "Good morning, Mrs. Brown. What can I do for you today?" Those are common. But the question is, we don't have a family name in Indonesia. Unless if you come from certain regions in Indonesia, like Sumatra or something, you have family name. In Central Java, if you're Javanese, you don't have any family name. So how do we call an Indonesian who doesn't have, a family name with Mrs.? So I let my students call me Mrs. Astri instead of Mrs. Hartandi because it's gonna be weird to hear that way of addressing me because Hartandi is not my family name; it's just my name. So I guess if you're in Rome, then you're gonna have to do the Roman ways, right? So yeah, I think it's fine to call someone Mrs. Astri or Mrs. Sinta. You call someone Mrs. and then you add, the first name. It's fine.